if we are comparing our nation, the United States of America, to a family and both are dysfunctional, is Trump our father?
Oh God,
Well, I think
I hope not.
really good question,
Fuck.
because what the mirror is in larger institutions and communities of family dynamics is that hierarchical structure. There are people in power and there are people that are supposed to obey or cooperate. And in a healthy family, even though the parents really have more power than the children, they share that power equally. They work together to provide a family structure and a family system that's good for them and their children.
Hi everyone, this is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey everybody, welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today our guest is Phyllis Leavitt. And let me tell y'all a little bit about Phyllis. She is an author and a psychotherapist of over 30 years. And her newest book, America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis, is all about bringing the best of what psychology and psychotherapy have to national attention to help us heal from escalating divisiveness and violence and restore us to a sense of brotherhood, peace, and cooperation. And exploring power dynamics, issues around equality, cooperation versus unbridled competition, and a new relationship to dependency and interdependence, directly and indirectly. She addresses many of the issues that characterize a more feminist approach to human relations and politics. Amen to all of that. Phyllis Leavitt, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to talk to you about your book.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's just a pleasure for me to be here. So I'm excited to jump in with whatever is most important and interesting to you.
Oh my gosh, there's so much.
Yeah.
Why America in therapy and why now?
Well, probably why 50 years ago or earlier than that.
Or
But
100 years ago, or
Yeah.
400 years ago,
Yeah,
or,
right,
yeah.
right. But really, in a nutshell, having done a lot of therapy myself as the client and then becoming a psychotherapist myself and working with hundreds of people, families, children, individual adults, teenagers, couples, it just became so clear to me that we are all very conditioned by the family dynamics that we grow up in, and that most people's healing actually centers around healing what was dysfunctional or even abusive in their family dynamics, in their family of origin, and sometimes in their extended family or immediate community. And so it just became really obvious to me that we're all in family systems that are much larger than our families of origin. Businesses, schools, houses of worship, corporations, government all operate on the same dynamics, and they're either healthy or unhealthy. And so what heals the individual family or the individual within a family system, whether you're even working with the family or not, you're working with those dynamics as they've been kind of imprinted in us. Those same dynamics can heal a group, they can heal a community, they can heal a nation. And I don't know that we all know that. And I don't know that we all know how what we see in our individual offices in terms of the dysfunction, because, people come to heal the dysfunction. If things are working, they don't come to therapy. What we know about what heals that dysfunction can be applied to any group. And so I really wanted to bring the principles, the healing understandings of what doesn't work and what does work to our largest groupings of people, really the collective. And really what I'm saying applies globally, but I'm an American, so I talk to America because that's the country I know.
Right.
Yeah.
In the book, you talk about, let me make sure I get the terminology right. You talk about high-tech human relations.
Right.
Can you go into that and talk about, first of all, what that means
Right.
and why that's important?
Well, just to say briefly, we are so interested as a people today in high-tech everything, high-tech phones, high-tech cars, high-tech computers, high-tech, communications, ways of transportation, medical services, all of it. We want the highest tech everything, but we haven't asked for the highest tech human relations. So
That's true.
when a car blows or an engine misfires, we're on it.
Mhm.
What went wrong? How do we fix it? How do we build a better engine that won't do that? When a person blows, we hate them. We condemn them. We want to throw them in jail and lock them up and throw away the key and not look at what made them blow and address that. So if there was abuse in the home, if there was discrimination in the community, if there was poverty and no way to rise above it, are we willing as the family system of America to address the conditions that had a person blow, that had a person
Mhm.
feel unwanted, unseen, unlovable, mistreated? So high-tech human relations are really like, how do we make human relations high-tech so that we
Mhm.
can avoid that kind of, terrible intergenerational passing down of trauma and dysfunction and abuse and neglect that always inevitably in certain cases will mushroom out into our larger communities. And we know that, the mass shooter didn't have a happy childhood, right?
Mhm.
So high tech really it's nothing that we don't know. I
Mhm.
call it the answers lying hidden in plain sight. It's love. It's a feeling of belonging. It's a feeling of being valued, of being supported, of being actually valued for who you are as opposed to somebody else. Maybe one child has a bent towards science and another is an athlete or just wants to work with animals. Can we honor our individuality within the context of the larger family systems? These are the things that make up a healthy family. And one of the big ones, and I didn't mention all of them, but being provided for, being safe, being able to have a voice, being able to disagree safely, which basically means that there's some skill to deal with conflict that doesn't harm anyone. These are known skills. We use them in different venues like divorce settlements, when people are come together for mediation. They learn how to talk to each other without attacking, right? They leave their, well, they're
Or
taught.
they're
Or
supposed
they're
to.
learning to,
They're
yeah.
supposed to.
That's the goal. The goal
Yeah.
is nonviolent conflict resolution. And that is one of the huge hallmarks of a healthy family system. Nobody does any of these things perfectly. We don't. We're human, we're fallible, we have triggers, sometimes we lose it. But in a healthy family system, there's a way to come back. There's a way to come back to the table. There's a way to say, I'm sorry. There's a way to make amends. And there's a way that's honored to try to do it better and differently. And
Mhm.
that's what high-tech human relations are. And that's what the best psychotherapy helps people achieve in their own lives. And I just want to emphasize again and again, none of us does it perfectly. I don't do it perfectly. I don't expect to ever do it perfectly, but I really value the tools that I have to come back to the table and start again if I'm not doing it well.
Well, I love that. And I want to eventually get into all the tools, and you have some 6 elements of repair that, of course, we'll want to talk about. But before we do that, I have a question that I'm just dying to ask. If we are comparing our nation, the United States of America, to a family and both are dysfunctional, is Trump our father?
Oh God.
Well, I think
I hope not.
really good question,
Fuck.
because what the mirror is in larger institutions and communities of family dynamics is that hierarchical structure. There are people in power and there are people that are supposed to obey or cooperate. And in a healthy family, even though the parents really have more power than the children, they share that power equally. They work together to provide a family structure and a family system that's good for them and their children. Okay, and those who are in positions of less power still have a voice. In a healthy family, children can say, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm upset, I don't like what my brother did. I don't want that for supper, whatever it is. So in a healthy family, there's still a mechanism for working out our individual needs and differences. And to the extent that a parent is, all powerful and or abusive, and to some extent all powerful is an abuse of power, because if nobody else has power, that's an abuse of power.
Right,
And
right.
so to the extent that a parent becomes all powerful, you have a total blueprint for abuse and neglect. And so in some ways you could say those in positions of the greatest power in a country, in a church, in a school, in a business, in a community, in some ways represent the parent figure in a family, and they can either hold that position in a healthy way with high-tech human relations, or they can hold that position in a very dysfunctional and abusive way, which is what I call low-tech human relations, which are hatred, discrimination, violence, no commitment to nonviolence. In fact, a lot of those dynamics that you see that I call low-tech human relations, or the dynamics of a dysfunctional or abusive family, are overpowering, shaming, blaming, impossible expectations, a focus on punishment or ostracizing people, or paying people in with whatever favors or money or privileges to be complicit with the abuse. And
Yes.
so those are the low-tech human relations. And it was impossible not to see that many of those are playing out on a national level and on the level of many institutions.
So I'm really glad that you wrote this book, and I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to read it, because this idea has been whittling away at my conscious and subconscious in regards to Trump and the role that he plays in family relations, because of something else you talk about in the book of the victim and the victimizer both being victims. I have often said on this podcast and other places, Trump must have been a little boy too at some point. I know, Raquel, we talked about this on the
No,
last,
I know.
we
Yeah,
talked
go ahead.
about this on the last podcast, and I have struggled with seeing, yes, he was a little boy, but now he's a man. And where does the responsibility step in? And how do we fix it with America and therapy?
Well, that's a huge question.
I
That's what.
know.
Okay. All right.
It's been
we do that a lot here.
Right.
yeah.
But basically, what I think most psychotherapists could tell you when they're working, having worked with so many people, is that inside the perpetrator is a victim somewhere.
Sure.
Because our worst behaviors come from the worst ways we were treated. When people are really loved, when they're supported, when they're seen for who they are and valued for who they are, when they have adequate access to resources, when they have a place, they belong, and when they're not treated with violence, when there's a commitment around them to nonviolent conflict resolution, and they learn those skills, they don't go out and become murderers. They don't become tyrants. They don't, unless there's some other conditioning agent that has affected them in a very negative and very conditioning way. So it's really important to know that. But one of the things that I talk about in my book that one of the many things that I don't think is common knowledge is that it's not just abuse and neglect that is sometimes at the heart of a perpetrator. It's also over empowerment.
Oh, I forgot that part. Yes.
No sense of a boundary between where I end and you begin, and where you end and I begin. And so I read some of Mary Trump's book. I didn't read the whole thing, but certainly I think that was a part of Trump's childhood. And I'm not here to diagnose President Trump, at all.
Don't worry, I
I
already
am.
have. Okay. Yeah, we already have. So
Raquel and
it's all
I
right.
we don't
Yeah.
agree completely
Right.
on our diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think these are also general things to look at when you're looking at a society. It's helpful to look at the individual leaders and what might have conditioned them to take the stand that they do in their policies and practices and their rhetoric and all of that. But we also have to remember that there's a whole populace that supported that point of view.
Mhm.
Yep.
What's
So
happening?
So how
Yeah,
do we
go ahead.
explain so how do we explain that? How do we explain all these people who are like, "Oh yeah, let's just elect the most abusive person we can think of."
That abuse is rampant in the United States of America.
I think it is actually.
It's
Yeah.
rampant.
It's rampant. I can tell you story after story after story of people who look just like you and me, who are functioning in their lives, who hold jobs, who raise their children, who go to the dentist, who feed their dog, who have stories that you just, it's hard to stomach what's happened to them in their
Mhm.
childhood.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not the purpose. And this is one of the reasons why I think talking about America and therapy is so important in our world today. It's not about blame. It's not. It's about getting to the root of what could be changed to break the cycle of abuse, to interrupt the pattern of neglect and discrimination and, such injustice that we see in certain parts of what's going on in our country. It's the purpose is to heal the country. It's not to blame and shame anyone. We all came by where we are because we did. Some
Mhm.
people identify with the perpetrator, and I talk about this a lot in my book, and you know that. And some people become helpless and they're easily controlled. Um, and I don't know that there's a formula for why certain people take one track and other people take another. But in all the years that I've been a therapist, that's what I've seen.
So
And go ahead.
oh, no, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one last thing. And I think one of the alarming things is that by and large, the people who find their way to therapy are people most in my practice anyway. I'll just speak for my practice. And, like I said, I've worked
Mhm.
with hundreds of people. Most often, they're people who have identified with being more passive and powerless and are trying to find their voice and their power in their relationships and in the world. It's much harder to bring someone who has identified with the aggressor to come to therapy because they're still addicted to their power and
Mhm.
control.
So I'm I'm really glad that you wrote this book, Phyllis. I think it's a really interesting uh what's the word I'm looking for? I think it's a really good exercise to think of America and therapy. I mean, Jennifer and I both have talked quite often about how we think most, if not all people can benefit from some therapy at some point in their lives. Uh, One thing that kept coming up for me reading the book, and I feel a little sad about it, and maybe I don't know if ashamed is the right word for it, but my cynicism kept coming up reading this book. Like, I really want to believe, yes, that everybody can be healed and, there's good at the base of everybody, but I I just can't help but feel that some people are just evil and full of hate, and there's just no fixing them, and it doesn't and I just feel like that for some people that are I'll just go ahead and say it, for people like Trump and, plenty of other people who do bad things, people, who go and shoot up a school, some of them are just evil and hateful, and they didn't come from a bad home. They didn't come from a bad family. They're just full of hate. I had a really hard time with that because I really want to believe in the premise of your book, and I really want to believe that therapy can help this nation and our world, but part of me just thinks that there are people and systems that are just at their core full of hate, and there's no fixing it.
Well, I just want to say I totally get what you're saying. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I have moments like that myself. I think it's human to really try to look what's going on in the world today in the face and not be really daunted by it. Uh,
Mhm,
but I would say this. It's not like I don't actually believe myself that in the current climate and what we know psychologically, that therapy per se could heal every person on this earth. I think there are people who are really damaged that we don't know how to heal. And those people do need to be restrained from
Hmm.
contact
Trump.
with our society because they're dangerous, you know. And at the same time, even if a person is incarcerated because they're really a danger to self and other, they pose a serious threat, even if they're incarcerated, they can still be seen as a human being, as the
For sure.
infant they were born,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
innocent infant they were born who got written on in some terrible way, or maybe they have, in rare cases, some brain anomaly that sets them up to not be able to function properly or safely. They can still be helped, even in a situation of restraint. They can still be seen as a human being. And I think in our world, I did tons of research for the book, and I don't have the number in front of me, but I've referenced this many times. Some of the current research shows that way over 50% of the current incarcerated population in the United States is suffering from unhealed childhood trauma.
Right.
And so people deserve to be helped, whether they can be put back into society or not. And I think we have many more people that can be helped than we want to admit, or that we
Right.
want to fund the necessary, help that could help them be restored. But part of it, and the reason why I wrote America in Therapy rather than Individual in Therapy and how can the individual in therapy help the country, is because I think we have to look at the family system of the country at the same time that
Hmm.
we look at the dysfunctional family dynamics on an individual level, and we have to address both. Because if
Right.
a person is released from prison, let's say, and they go back into a community where they're hated for the color of their skin, where they have no access to making a decent living to support themselves or their family, they're set up,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm. Yeah.
to
They're just set up for failure.
Okay,
think
so
they
if
have to
we,
heal the family. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Go
no,
ahead.
no, so you got my mind twirling here.
No.
So we're gonna go back to Trump again, because it's my favorite subject. In my family, my dysfunctional mess of a family, my brother was the canary in the coal mine. He
Mhm.
made all the noise, he did all the stuff, he got the bad grades, he hurt people, he beat me up, the list goes on and on. Is Trump then the canary in the coal mine for the United States? Is he the troubled child? And by putting all of our focus on him, we're not seeing the dysfunction of the real parents of our country, maybe the Constitution and how our country was founded. Are we are we not seeing, like in some of the examples in your book, the
Mhm.
kid was in trouble and they came in, but they weren't actually the one in trouble. It was the
Right.
parents and the marriage and the fighting and the dysfunction.
Well, that's exactly what I talk about in my book, which I talk about, like I gave the example of the child who was wetting the bed. And
Hmm.
yeah, you could say, what's wrong with this child? They're 10 or 11 years old and they're wetting the bed. They should know better by now. They should have some self-control, blah, 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 blah. And it could be the child that's hitting. It could be the child that's setting fire to the house. It could be the child who's the bully on the playground. And we do know in the world of psychology that you have to look back at what's going on in the family. Like in that instance, the parents were both, screaming and yelling and using drugs. And that child was called the identified patient for the family. And we know this in the world of psychology, but we don't know this in the general public, that the person who robs the bank, the person who molests children, the person who whatever, all the terrible, shoots up the school, the person who exploits elderly people with no remorse, those people are also the identified patients for the family of America. And underneath their terrible behaviors, and I know this is really hard for people to digest, there is a call for help. Just like the child who's the bully on the playground is actually calling for help.
So what I'm asking is, instead of Trump being our Mac Daddy Trump of the United States, is he our, what'd you call it,
The
identified child?
identified child. Yeah.
Is he our
Identified
identified?
patient of the family of America.
Yeah.
Think you could say that. And I think you can, and I think that's a helpful way to look at it, because you want to go back to the whole family system. just like if the child who, you know, is hitting their sibling and real like your brother, it's not just his problem. Yes, he has to learn how to control his behavior, and he has to learn how to become a safe human being. And hopefully he gets a chance to heal from whatever set him up to act out in that way. But then the family system really needs to come together and look and see, like, what's setting this child up? What is he calling for help for? Where did he learn these behaviors if he did? Or what rage or feeling of disconnection is happening inside of him that actually needs to be addressed? Maybe he needs restraint, you know, in some
He
way,
does.
firm but loving restraint. But he also needs to have something addressed inside of him that would help him feel some self-control, that would help him feel like he could manage his upset feelings, that he is a worthy person, whatever. So you take the biggest, most, you know, most glaring identified patients in a family, whether it's your family, my family, or the family of America, and yes, you bring some kind of help and treatment to them, and you also look at the family structure that is continually fueling this kind of behavior.
So is the structure around Trump, is it his family of origin, or is it more the country and our capitalistic viewpoint and our misogynistic viewpoint and our the history that our country was founded on that we refuse to acknowledge?
I think exactly what I was going to say. I think it's all of the above. And that's why I wrote the book the way I did, to really bring the microcosm and the macrocosm together, to look at them together. Because, you know, if you, and I know you remember because you're referencing it, when someone comes to therapy, we ask them about their childhood. What were
Yeah.
the conditioning role models? What were the conditions that they grew up in? What were the beliefs they were taught? What were the behaviors that were role modeled? How did men and women treat each other? What were the expectations? What were the rewards and punishments? All of that. How was conflict dealt with? So that needs to be looked at in the family of America. And we start, as you said, and this was real is really important, with a history. So if America were in therapy, we have to look at our own history. Who
And we aren't, though.
I know.
I mean, we
We're
literally are
erasing
not.
it. We're erasing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is exactly what abusive and dysfunctional families do. Oh, I don't remember doing that. I never did that. How
Oh,
many
they
times have
shove
you,
it in the closet, the skeleton in the closet.
Mhm.
or I did that because you blah 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 blah. You deserved that.
Uh,
Or I don't see these people as human, I see them as animals, so we must destroy them.
it's for their own good.
Which is what we did from the very
Mhm.
beginning to the Native
Mhm.
Americans, and certainly we did to the people we brought over as slaves.
Mhm.
So, and we still do it.
Mhm.
We still do
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So we have to look at that. And one of the things that, you know, I'm repeating everything you know because you read the book, but just for your discussion for your audience, when people come to therapy, it can be very difficult to talk about the pain that you received yourself. It's
Mhm.
very hard for people to open up and cry and feel the pain and really just let it out because we have such a, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you know, be tough, whatever.
Mhm.
Kind of culture,
Suck it up.
but it's even harder to talk about what you've done that hurt other people. And
Mm.
Mhm.
you have to do both. And
Mhm.
I can tell you over and over again in therapy, both myself and working with other people, that when you are in a non-judgmental, supportive environment to delve into your own pain, most often you automatically see the pain that you've caused as well and want to take responsibility for it. Nobody has to make you do it. It's part of healing that, like, I mean, I could give you a million examples, but
Mhm.
that's what I've seen, that when people really have a chance to heal what was done to them, they really want to take responsibility for what they've done.
Mm.
So, oh,
Or they're
sorry.
at least open to the suggestion. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
Okay.
right, right.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I was thinking about reading the book is that how we as people or how countries react to the harm that's been done to them. It's not helpful to just retaliate, or if somebody punches me, punch them back, or if a country bombs my country, bomb them back. I mean, that just it just leads to
More of the same.
generations of tit for tat, and that's not helping anybody.
Right.
So what do we do? You know, for instance, if, you know, somebody takes a bunch of our people hostage, or somebody bombs us for our beliefs, or, you know, whatever, how does a country in therapy deal with that? Or maybe that's too big a question, but
Well,
that
yeah,
literally was just going through my head the whole time I was reading it.
it's a really big question, and there's no one answer. I think the answer, and I don't have the whole answer. I'm offering what I know. You know,
Right.
an economist might give you a totally different slant on what needs to happen, or someone from a religious point of view might have a totally other slant on what needs to happen
Of
to
course.
heal or break the cycles of violence. But I think the first part is being accountable for ourselves. You know, so before crying victim as a country, I think we have to look at who we've been as a country, how we've
Mhm.
Hmm.
treated other people. You know, if we've thrown the first punch somewhere, it's not okay to just cry victim if the punch comes back. You know, so
Right.
I think the first part, and this is what that whole chapter on repair is about, is taking accountability for ourselves. You know, because, and let me just say, there are things that you and I are powerless over. Right now, I can't stop what's happening with immigration. I wish I
Right.
could with all my heart. It breaks my heart. I can't do anything about it. Um, I mean, I'm doing what I can do about it, but you know what I'm saying? I can't
Yeah.
intervene in that venue right now.
Right.
And for many people that I've worked with, myself included, there are things we have no power over in our lives. And I think the two-pronged approach to that is to learn how to tolerate the distress of that, because that is something that is very, very painful for the human psyche to feel
Yeah.
power,
Hmm.
and to focus on what we do have power over. And I've said that a million times to a million people, and I've said it to myself. There are things that I can't change, so I have to focus on where I think I can have an impact. Um, and I think that if more and more people are doing that, then on a grassroots level, that can change the substructure of a society. Whether we'll live to see it, whether it will actually happen. And I did want to say one more thing, and I think this speaks to what you brought up earlier about the cynicism and, you know, not really seeing that maybe there is hope because it just seems like too little too late. Um, I think for as long as I live, I want to do what I can.
Hmm.
Don't know that it will change the world. We may be going toward our own extinction, you know, with our belief in war and nuclear weapons. I really hope not. I really hope not.
Or we could be watching the crash of a paradigm and something else rising from the ashes.
Right. And I
I
think
hope.
that's how I like to look at it. So we're all part of that. You're part of it. I'm part of it. All the people I know and love are part of that, of really trying to shift the paradigms.
Yeah. On page 159, you said, quote, or you wrote, quote, peace is an urgent evolutionary challenge. Why do you think that?
Very simply, because if we stay on the track that we are on in terms of domination and the ways that we can dominate, you know, the big ones are our belief in weapons of mass destruction, as if we could build the bomb that could end war. It's absurd. You know,
Yeah.
we're building the bombs that can end life as we know it.
Mhm.
So I think a commitment to peace just on that level is a commitment to the sustainability of life as we know it, which is not just human life, but all the other lives that we depend on to be human beings and stay alive. Um, but I also think that just in terms, we are also using psychological weapons on each other.
Oh, all the time.
Yes. Misinformation is a psychological weapon. Erasing the past is a psychological weapon. Seeing certain people as inferior and therefore not worthy is a psychological weapon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we could go on and on and on. And I think we have to identify those because that's really what coming back to high-tech human relations is all about. All of
Mm-hmm.
those psychological weapons that we're talking about. Psychological warfare is alive and well in America and all over the world today. And we have people who are dedicated, to figuring out what's the spin that can, that can get them what they want and at
Mm.
great cost of human suffering. I think we have to make all that known. I think,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really the heart of my book is like, how do we take what we know in our offices and bring it into national conversation? Help people really understand that the school shooter was born a little, newborn infant that got written on.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we unwrite that script so that we don't keep passing this down?
And how do
Right.
we notice the script is happening and help the kid before he becomes the mass shooter,
100%.
right?
100%.
How do we
Well,
notice?
well, and I think, Phyllis, you talk about this in your book, and I'm going to read uh, a quote from your book in a second, but people have been talking about something similar for, for millennia. We've got Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we've got bell hooks, we have, Quakers, we have, all of these
And
people,
shakers,
and
Quakers and shakers.
Quakers and Shakers, talking about, nonviolent communication, nonviolent ways of solving problems, uh, love as a way of moving forward, like leading from a sense of love and a definition of love that we don't usually talk about. Not like the romantic frou-frou love that we all think about with rom-coms and everything, but the sort of like the
Energy.
deep, deep love for humanity.
Mm,
I think it's called agape love, right?
mm.
Like that deep, deep love that I think Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about, and that sense of nonviolent communication and nonviolent action. And I think we need to, and like you say in the book, which I'm going to read this quote in a second, but I think that's what we need to focus on. Although that's a very dangerous thing to focus on because we see, people who talk about these things aren't always supported and then sometimes they're killed for it. But I don't think that should stop us. But on on page 180, you write, we are blaming and punishing our victims instead of helping them. A politics of love would address poverty, racial injustice, housing and education issues, family violence, drug addiction, and a whole host of other ills before it would put one more person into prison slavery. And that right there, I think, is the, I mean, that's the crux of what we need to do, but it isn't being done, or it isn't being done or talked about in a way that's resulting in what we need it to.
Absolutely. I think I'll say a few things and then tell me if I'm addressing what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Not profitable. None of those things are
Yeah,
profitable.
yeah.
So that's one thing that we really have to look at. What's the cost of the profit that we get?
Mhm,
What's the high cost?
mhm.
That's part of what I'm talking about in the book because the high cost is increasing human suffering. And increasing human suffering without being addressed or remediated is going to cause more acting out and more violence. And I really think it's just escalating because more people that are hurt, that don't get help, that don't get what they need, that don't get valued, they're either going to become, again, these are generalities that I'm saying, either more passive and easily controlled or more easily able to identify with the aggressor and become the dominators. And that's
Mhm.
the world we're creating right now. What brings people to therapy is pain. People come to therapy when what they're doing really isn't working. And they've tried
Mhm.
everything and they've tried it 100 times and they keep trying it, thinking it's going to work this time, or they give up, or they drink, or they do whatever they do. They act out or they act in. And when it gets bad enough, sometimes they ask for help. And that's
Mhm.
usually the opening. I mean, I've had a few people that have come to say, well, we just really want to upgrade our relationship. You know, we have a good relationship, but we really want to upgrade the relationship. Well, two sessions in, that's not the story. You know, there's really enormous pain.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I think I talk about this in my book, we have to be able to feel our pain, to want
Yeah.
help. And we are at a turning point, I believe, in human history. Never before we've had wars, we've had slaughter, we've had domination, we've had slavery, we've had, you know, people killing each other for gold and for whatever they do. But I don't think we've been at a time in human history, at least that I know of, where we have the power to wipe ourselves off the face of the earth. We could
Right.
wipe out our enemy, but now we have the power to wipe ourselves off the face of the earth. And for me, it's like, can we feel the pain of that? Can we feel the gun own head? Can we
Mhm.
tell each other we're holding a gun to our own heads? And can we keep saying it until we all want help? You know, um,
Yeah.
that's part of my commitment. Whether that will be heard, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's I think in a way it's a really brave thing for you to say that and to write this book because of the people that I listed, there are so many people who are saying this same thing and have said something similar for generations and
Right,
they aren't always met with open arms.
right,
They're rarely met with open arms. Let's be for
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Two of the things I like that you talked about in the book that I just want to highlight because we're kind of running out of time, and then we'll have you do a reading, hopefully. One, you talked about Marianne Williamson when she ran for president on a platform of love and how dismally she was received. She was
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
basically laughed
She was
at.
ridiculed.
Yeah.
She was ridiculed.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then another point, you said it twice in the book that these are feminist issues, but you didn't really want to get into the feminist issue in the book. But I love this part, and I wasn't going to read it, but because what you were just talking about the fact that we have the ability to annihilate ourselves on page 176, you said, is it because peace advocates won't mobilize the troops? Women won't push the button. Yes. A commitment to love and connection would make it nearly impossible to wage war and out of the question to launch nuclear missiles. And that is exactly what we need. Like,
I agree with
yes,
myself.
I agree with you also. And yes, their big thing is like a woman president would never have the strength to push the button. How about she'd have the strength not to push the button?
Exactly. How about she'd have the strength to figure out another way to solve the problem, to actually have the conversations that need to be had instead of just going, "Oh, let me just go and drop this bomb on somebody."
Right. I mean, even the question, a woman wouldn't have the strength to push the button, is coming from that point of view that the values of peace and love and belonging and safety are weakness. And
Mhm.
they're not.
Mhm.
And they're not.
The exact opposite is true. It takes much more strength, much more courage, much more perseverance, much
Mhm.
more patience and self-honesty to wage peace.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and to have the conversations that will lead to peace, to have the conversations where you're actually
Right.
going to listen to the person that like you've talked about before, to listen to the person that you've harmed and to listen to somebody to talk about the harm that you have caused.
That's right. It's hard. And anybody who's honest about their personal relationships knows how hard it is.
Mhm.
How hard is it for me if I'm really triggered or hurt or I really disagree to just stay in my center and be open to your point of view? I have to work really hard to get to that place. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't do it perfectly. I don't. And I don't know
Mhm.
anybody who does.
No,
Mhm.
it is really, really difficult. It doesn't mean we can't do it.
That's
As
right.
Glennon Doyle says, we can do hard things.
We can do hard things.
Right.
Did you want to read a little excerpt from your
I
own
had
book?
just a little paragraph at the end of the book and I loved that you asked that. I thought that was really wonderful to offer that. So this is from the very last part, the chapter 13 called America the Beautiful. It is a strange place to stand here on the bridge between the terror of the situation and the hope for our country. I think this is where we stand if we can allow ourselves to know it. I, for one, want to bridge the great divide between us, and I hope you are walking with me. I see this as the next leg of our evolutionary journey, and for that, we will need a new energy source. It won't come from fossil fuels, the sun, wind, or water. It will come from inside us, from harnessing our hatred and the need to destroy and using all that energy to come back home to one another. The hope for our country is that we see this now and that we can have compassion for ourselves and all others for the hard road we have often walked.
Mm.
Beautiful. Was there anything else you wanted to tell our audience that we didn't give you the chance to?
Well, I would just, encourage anybody to read the book because, I really go into everything that we've talked about here in great depth and because I really just want to make this public knowledge. And I wrote the book for the layman. It's not a psychological journal. It's not an academic book. There's some personal stuff in there. There's a lot of client case histories, disguised,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
a lot of professional observation and then reference to current events. I wrote this, the book came out a year ago, so some of it's a little bit not dated, but referencing more like 2022, 2023.
Yeah, Trump
Mhm.
wasn't our president when you wrote it
Wrote it.
again.
And
Mm.
then the other thing I just want to say is I just created a book bundle and I think I sent you that link. And if anyone goes to that, they can get the ebook, the audio book, a full course of how to apply this book in your own life, and 2 PDFs that are on conflict style and resolution. And I just want to share the information. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share what I'm passionate about and I really, really value your questions and your insight and the depth of your experience that you bring to this because that really makes it such an amazing conversation for me.
Thank you.
Thank thank you, Phyllis. Thank you for writing this book. And we'll put links to all of that in the show notes so that people can get that bundle and reach out to you and to read the book.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you. I know that was a tough one for you.
Yeah,
So you want to
yeah,
recap?
I do. So much kept coming up for me while I was reading this. And the first thing, I mean, I think it's a really interesting uh tool that Phyllis uses in the book of Lady Liberty being
Oh, I
the
love
one
that.
in therapy. I thought
Yeah.
that was a really interesting
Yeah.
tool
I love
for the
that part.
book. And the first thing that came up for me, I don't know if you've seen, there's a meme or something that pops up on, like Facebook and Instagram and whatever from time to time. And it's something like, I'm in therapy because of the people in my life who won't go to therapy. And so that kept popping up for me reading this book. But I mean, generally, I'm like, happy go lucky and carefree and blah, blah, blah. And I'm generally kind of Pollyanna, but there's also a side of me that's just so cynical. And I found that those two parts of myself were literally fighting with each other the entire time I was reading the book. And I think that was really, really hard for me. And I don't think I realized how hard that was until we started talking about it. Because I
Yeah.
literally like all day have just been like, and I get it. I think it was those parts of myself trying to wrestle with where we go from here.
And Raquel, that makes total sense. Like, why wouldn't this is the fundamental conversation I've been having for the last 6 months with you
Mm-hmm.
on every podcast we talk about is my primary relationship in my life, the one with my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Do I see him as evil or do I see him as a little boy? I see
Right.
him as both,
Right.
right? And they're both at Trump. Do I see him as evil or do I see him as a little boy? I see him as both. And those
Yeah.
two sides of me are warring in a
Mm-hmm.
similar way that those two sides of you are warring.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
get it, man. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer because I believe like Phyllis does, I don't think anyone is born evil unless of course they have something fundamentally wrong with their brain. But damn if we don't have a whole lot of awful violent writing that is
Mm-hmm.
happening on people. And I look at my own childhood and I don't really even know what happened, to be honest. And I'm like, how did my brother, how did he must have identified. He must have
Mm-hmm.
identified with his abuser. And I
Mm-hmm.
must have been the opposite side, the one that was easily manipulated or however it was put.
Right.
And I look at that in our society. We are the ones that go to therapy. We are the ones that are trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? And that makes us codependent in a way. Like it's all
Yeah.
very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And then and I remember you talking about this on the podcast we had with Fanny Tristan.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about being single and being in relationship. And you were like, and it's not my job to fix it.
Yeah.
And that has come to my mind so many times in thinking about this me with my brother, or me in a relationship with a man, or me with Trump. I don't even have the ability to fix it with
Mm-hmm.
Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
can see it clear as day, but we don't have the ability to fix it.
Right.
It's not my job to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the book is hopeful.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you can even entertain the notion of writing a book like this if you aren't hopeful.
On page 188, at the very top, she says, he told me that therapy was his very first experience of feeling there was anything in him worth salvaging. And then this next line, how we are seen by others has everything to do with how we relate to ourselves. That just sat with me with everything I've been working on in the holotropic breath work and my own therapy. And it's like, I did see the little boy in my brother, but
Yeah.
my brother didn't see the little boy in him.
Right.
But how do we get people who refuse to see that within themselves, like Trump? How do we get him to therapy? How do we get all these people that are supporting him into therapy? How do we?
Yeah. Like what do we?
It seems monumental.
Yeah, because I mean, Trump and Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon and
It seems monumental.
all that, like what they aren't gonna go to therapy.
No.
But we don't give up. We don't give up.
Well, we
I mean,
can't.
right. I mean, yeah, we feel this despair and this internal warring of hope and cynicism, but we don't just lay down and let it overtake us. Yeah,
No.
we don't just roll over and die.
I mean, we could. That's always a choice.
Well, yeah, but I honestly don't think first off, I don't think you and I have that ability to just roll over and die. That's why we're doing this, right?
Right.
And I think that there's so many other people, the people who are out there, like Phyllis, the people who are having the conversations and putting forth different ideas. Thank God for those people, because otherwise, literally, we would just cease to exist as a free people.
On page 201, she has started to list main points of the book in her conclusion, which I think is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Her final main point, she says, we can understand that war is easy, and then a commitment to safety, peace, and love is the hardest, most courageous, and most gratifying work we will ever do. As Americans and as humans, and that making them our number one priority could very well mean the difference between life and death for all of us.
Right.
She also has a list of how you can help.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, get the book,
Yeah.
get yourself in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
love one another, try to see one another.
Yeah. And by love, we don't mean this like doe-eyed,
No, do each other, do
fairy
each other
tale,
love.
right, exactly. Like, yeah, like fairy tale, I only see the good in you bullshit. I mean, it's not that. Love is a much more difficult thing than the shit that's like forced down our throat by fairy tales and rom-coms. And
Agreed.
that's what we need to learn, I think, as a people. And I think that that's what's that is gonna be our saving grace, but it's not gonna be easy. Damn. There's a conversation.
There's a conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend.
Or you could leave us a comment and a 5-star review, or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks, everybody.